Alright, well, welcome back to another video slaving away on this thing for no real reason. So this morning I went down and picked up the new motor. It's right behind. I'll give you a quick, it's covered up in the trailer. So I went down, met up with a nice bloke actually by the name of Jacob, and yeah, picked up this motor. So like I said in the other video, I wasn't planning on any of this. Sort of just was spinning my mind, and then things eventuated and it was able to happen. So this is the path that we're taking. I did leave it up to you guys in the video where I pulled the motor out. I said have a guess what's going on in this car and what's happening. And there was a few funny comments, and what I'm going to do is briefly go through them soon and explain why I would and wouldn't go them motors. Again, that's just all my opinion stuff. Everyone's got different opinions, so that's fine. You might not even care for that, but that's fine. So gave me a few other bits with it. So I've got to pull the motor out, put in the shed here, and then start working on it. Yeah, there's not much time left. I've got to get it in here, get everything happening, and get it on the dyno, because I'm really not sure if Wild Dog's going to happen at the moment, but if it does, there's not much time left. So we'll get cracking on that. No, can't show you that. Cannot show you that. So we've got the motor sitting here. We've got a special guest for the reveal. Ready? Where is he? Look at him. Give it a rev. Where the homos hang out. Alright, so I've got the motor here. Before I pull the sheet off it, I'll quickly go through some of the comments I've got. You may not care, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So, actually the video got a lot of comments. Reading through the comments, you know, there's sort of really only 3 or 4 options you can go. But not many people got it right. So reading through the comments, there was a lot of like LS mode, like LS1, LS2, LS3, LSA. So for me personally, I've never really been a fan of the LS. Not that I'm not saying they're a bad motor or anything, but they just don't do it for me. I don't think the money invested in the motor shows in like benefits. But that's just me. I prefer the sound of a Turbo 6 over the V8. I prefer the power of the Turbo 6 over the V8. And I prefer the Turbo 6 in the engine bay. They fit a lot better. So that's just me and my opinion. I know a lot of people have different opinions, but that's just me. I'm 99.9% sure that you'll never see me do an LS conversion in either of my cars. So that's that. I had a few random ones like VK56. So obviously someone's having a joke, RD28. Someone else had a bit of a joke, Ecotech. What else have we got? Yeah, there's a few random ones. Hellcat 6.4 Hemi. Like, I'm not a millionaire, so that won't go in, but none of the other motors will go in there. So like I said, I prefer a Turbo 6. So pretty much that's what's going in. It's a Turbo 6. You know the saying, 6 in a row, you're ready to go. 8 in a V, you sit to pee. So keep that in mind. I should actually get that made into a sticker. We'll see how I go. That'd be funny. So I had a few people say, not many actually, but someone said a 1J or a 2J. Again, I won't be doing that. If I was to do a small capacity Turbo 6, it would be in a four-wheel drive, it would be an RB30 block with an RB25 head. RBs are the go. I do love RBs. So if I was doing a small capacity, something like that, an RB would be going in, but that's not going in either. So there was a lot of people saying Barras. Now I'm a huge fan of Barras. I reckon they're a brilliant engine. The only thing that really annoys me is the exhaust being on the driver's side. So in all honesty, if the exhaust was on the left-hand side and the intake was on the right, like a normal Nissan motor, you would honestly I would have a barrier in one of these cars. So It's as simple as that. And they're a brilliant motor. They make awesome power. And if you get one of the green top ones, yeah, they're virtually indestructible and they're just a good solid motor. But yeah, like I said, that's not going in. I had, yeah, someone else said 1HDT. I personally wouldn't do that. Maybe I would do it in a touring car if the motors were a realistic price, but the price they go for is just absolute rip-off. So I'll never buy one of them. They're way too expensive for what they are. So none of that. And also the exhausters on the driver's side, which is big no-no for me. I hate that. So there's really, we're running out of options here. Most of the comments I would say were saying turbo 4.8. So straight up, it's not a turbo 4.8. But if I was changing the motor, like doing a conversion, that's what I would be using. So they're just like a big capacity RB, double overhead cam and exhaust on the correct side, which is the left side. So they fit awesome in a GQ. The only thing, I haven't personally done too much research into it, but I'm pretty sure you either have to run a bonnet scoop or a body lift because they're such a tall motor. Someone will probably correct me on that, but as far as I know, I think that's what you have to do. So that brings us down to what's actually under this sheet. So here we go. This is what's going in. Gotchas. It's a TB42. Would I leave my TB42 brothers like that? No. So TB42 going back in, but there is something a bit special about this motor. So we'll get into that right now. I did unintentionally drop a few hints in the last video about some information. I was hard to explain things that I'm doing without sort of giving it away. I didn't really give it away, but you know, no one really said anything, which is funny. But anyway, so this is what's going in. I picked this up off a nice fella, Jacob was his name. Unfortunately, I had to part his car out, and I seen the motor and the kit and everything that was with it come up, but I don't need any of that. So I was just interested in the motor, and yeah, he ended up parting with the motor and then separating the whole kit that he had for sale. So I picked up the motor. The motor's only done 3,000 Ks since it's been built. So with this motor, it is a fully built motor. So it has spool rods and Ross Racing pistons. They're 20 thou oversized. It has a Crow Cam's custom grind cam. I cannot remember the duration off the top of my head. It's got valve springs. It's got the head bolts and whatever else. Like, he gave me a pile of receipts with the motor, and yeah, it would have been quite expensive to build this. You add up the receipts and yeah, it all adds up. So I'm not chasing peak power. The reason I bought this was merely just out of convenience. And like I said, when I pulled the motor out of this, it's something I've been thinking of doing for a little while. Like the head on this motor is good. It's got valve springs. It's been ported out and that. So it's been on my mind for a little bit, maybe just to get a block built with the forges in it. But yeah, this sort of came up and I got it for a reasonable price, and it was, yeah, like I said, just convenient. So when I pulled the motor out, like I said in that video, I was never actually planning on pulling the motor out. I was just going to change the turbo setup. So different manifold, turbo, wastegate, injectors, but we'll get into that in a minute. And yeah, this was just all too convenient. So like I said, I'm not chasing peak power. I don't want to make like 1,000,000 kilowatts. I'm just all about the drivability. But having this motor is just, I can run a little bit more power and I can abuse it a little bit more and know that it's, you know, not going to do something funny and blow up or whatever. So it's been on my mind for a little while, because when this block went in, it's a long story, but it was just before Patrol Apart race in 2018. It was like 2 or 3 weeks before the race. I had to swap the motor out. But at that stage, I had a good head, so I had to swap the head from the other motor to this motor. I got this motor for cheap, it was like $100. It had gas stuff on it. So when I pulled the head off this, I was just checking all the cylinders, me and Jesse were, and then noticed that number 6 piston sat suspiciously lower than the rest. You know, the rest of them were, you know, by feel, you know, say flush with the block deck, and then number 6 was like a couple mil down, which was real strange. So the theory is I never pulled it apart because we had like 2 weeks before the race, and I was like, oh, we'll just chuck it in and send it. So the theory is that it does have a bent rod, number 6, only slightly maybe, but yeah, being on gas could have potentially done a gas backfire at some stage in its life and then potentially bent the rod. There's sort of no other explanation, I feel, for why that number 6 piston sat lower than the rest. I've never compression checked it. I've never done any of that. We literally put the head on, put it in the car and then raced it. So that's been in the car for over 3 years. I haven't done much driving, obviously. It spends a lot of time in the bloody shed, but every time I'm just holding it on and, you know, flogging the piss out of it, I always think one day that number 6 rod is gonna let go and it's gonna make a mess. So that's where this comes in. I've always just kept an eye out for like a low kilometer TB, like something in the 200,000s is what I was chasing. And then I was just going to swap the motors anyway at some stage, put that head on another motor. But yeah, this come up and I thought I'll snap it up real quick and we can make bulk power. Not that that's really what I'm after, but potentially make bulk power. And it is running the TB45 steel head gasket, which, yeah, I haven't personally done anything before, but apparently you just got to drill 1 hole in it for an oil feed to the head. So if I ever have to pull the head off, I'm sure it's not going to be that hard to figure out. But yeah, it does have the TB45 head. So the plan is I'm just going to probably feed like 20 pound into it, and just whatever it makes at 20 pound, that's what we're rolling with. So it does have other stuff, new alternator, new water pump, all the stuff. It's had new timing chain, new guides, yeah, gaskets throughout and whatever. So it is actually nice and fresh. So pretty much what I've got to do is the fan's got to come off, the aircon pump's got to come off, and I've got to put my alternator on it, which I'll show you. Someone asked me about the bracket. It's dodgy, but I'll show you. I've got to swap the rocker covers over because I've welded some things on there to work with me breathers to get rid of these. Swap the top half of the intake manifold over, and I'll show you some bits to get rid of under there with the TB, swap the clutch over, and just general bits and pieces. So I don't know, maybe I should wait until next week's video to tell you what the turbo, so what I've bought, yeah, new turbo, new manifold, wastegate. I've got all this other stuff. I've probably been talking long enough in this bloody video, so I reckon I'll wait till next week to tell you. But that's what I'm gonna do today, strip this down, put all the stuff over. I need to get this motor ready to go in, because today or this Arvo or tomorrow I want to get it in, and then I'm still waiting on my manifold, but once that comes I can do it all in there. So I have actually mounted a bigger intercooler. I'll see if we can get a better look on this side. So it's actually the same one that's in my wagon. It's a tube and fin style, and it's just a generic size 300 by 600 by 76. And I've made this top radiator support bolt in. You can see there, so I've got 2 bolt holes there to go in, but that just pulls off, and then the whole intercooler comes out. Because before, like, you couldn't actually pull the intercooler out with the bar and winch still on and the motor in there, like it was just too tight. So that's the idea with that. I can pull it all out, and you know, if I have to do something to the front of the motor, it's easy just to pull out, and then I've got plenty of room in there. So that's one thing. I did get one of them power steering coolers, which I was talking about in the other video. So I've got to find a spot for this, but I think I have to wait till the motor goes in before I find a good spot for that. It may end up on the chassis rail down the back here somewhere. But it's just a finned reservoir. It holds a fair bit of capacity. It should somewhat offer like a decent amount of cooling for the power steering. And obviously having more capacity is a bonus too. And because it's down low, you know, it'll be in the water and bog holes and things like that. So should keep the power steer nice and cool. I did get a few other goodies. So I just got these water lines, which I sold the other water lines with the turbo that I had on here, but they're the same water lines that were on it that'll fit on this new turbo. So just so I don't have to change anything, because I don't need to, it all works pretty fine. Roadrunner off-road, of course, coming through with the goods with these Nissan gaskets. I talked about these in my last video. If you didn't watch it, that's fine, because it's long and ridiculous. But yeah, these are factory TD turbo gaskets. They're multi-layer steel, factory Nissan. Roadrunner's got a good price on them. I've got a clutch fork boot for the bell housing to go on. And I've also got these new gear stick bushes. So the one bush on the end of the stick, the one bush that holds the ball of the stick in the top of the box. If you have a sloppy gear stick like this, so that's in second. It's got a fair bit of slop there. New bushings will fix that. So that's got to go in. And I did get a like a unbreakable engine mount race bred one for the driver's side too, just to get rid of the factory one. No real reason for that, but just so I'm running both on the same side. So that's that. Hopefully you guys are still watching now. The last video, all I did was talk the whole time, and this video seems to be the bloody same. All I do is talk crap. So at the end of the day, I'm hoping to see around maybe 300 kilowatts at the hubs with this motor and the turbo setup. Hopefully be nice and responsive, but I don't really care if it doesn't make 300. That's just sort of at a guess. You know, the wagon makes 253 at the hubs on 13 pound or 14 pound. And so I'm just sort of hoping we feed 20 into this. It'll make around 300. So the turbo, we'll get into the turbo stuff in the next video. But it should be nice and responsive. It's sort of an in-between size. It's a little bit bigger than the wagon one, but it's a bit smaller than the one that was on here that I just sold. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes, because it's a completely different turbo. But yeah, like I said, we'll get into the finer details of that in the next episode. For now, I don't know, I might put you on a time lapse, offer some form of work footage. So what I'm going to do is, start stripping this motor down and get it ready to put this other stuff on. All right, well, since I've got a fairly well complete intake manifold, I thought I'd just show you what you can and can't get rid of. So these have, well, most Japanese cars have the coolant running through the throttle body. So you can see it comes out there, which is into this block here. So through underneath the throttle body, and then goes to this hose here, which goes into the back of your head, which is where I was talking about, where I've got a barb for the turbo water on my race car. So these are your heater hoses. So they go up into your firewall for your heater. And like I was saying, comes out of the back of the water pump there, and along you got this steel rail. There are a few random hoses coming off. So what I'm gonna do, you can get rid of all this stuff under here. I'll split the intake manifold and we'll get a better look at it, and I'll show you what you can remove. You can remove a fair bit of crap from under there. So you can delete these coolant lines. You know, whether you silver solder that up or get a different bung with a different heater hose, whatever you want to do, you can get rid of that hose. Potentially you could feed that into your turbo, whatever. It looks like this was for his turbo anyway with this barb here. That's not factory, it's just a straight line there. So however you want to choose to do it. Obviously, yeah, he's had his water there. So these are your idle control valve and your aircon idle up. So the idle control valve is like a little stepper motor, and that controls your idle, you know, your idle speed. There is a manual adjustment in the back here, you can manually adjust it. But in the Haltech, you can just sort of set that manual adjuster to a certain point, then you can adjust the rest with the Haltech. And this is your idle up for your aircon. This plug here, this purple one. So when you flick the aircon on, this opens up another valve and it picks up your idle for the extra load the aircon pump puts on the motor. I don't run them on the race car because I don't have aircon. I don't have the idle control valve either because it was just more stuff that I didn't really need on this car. It's all right if it was super cold. You know, you sort of have to give it a bit of throttle and just rev it a little bit when you first start it. But other than that, it's good. I don't have any dramas with it stalling or anything like that. But in the wagon, I've still got both of them. And if your car is something like the wagon, like a Tour or whatever, I would advise keeping that, like keep it. But yeah, if you just got a race hack car, it's sort of not really that necessary. The idle in here, we've drilled a hole. I don't know if you can see in there actually. I'll get a light. So see that hole in there? That's what we come up with to get the idle right. We just sort of drilled a little bit bigger until the idle was good. It idles, yeah, around 900 RPM. It's fine. But that's the way we done it. You could, I mean, realistically, you could adjust this little stopper here, but whatever, we went the hole. Because realistically, the idle control valve only bypasses air around the throttle body. So if you have a look here, this is your idle control valve. It's got a hose off the back of it. It comes around, and then there's a hose here that goes into your intake. So all it does is bypass air, like past your throttle body, goes into here, into the intake plenum. So that's all that does. You can see this other hose that tees into it. This is another vacuum hose. This goes to your cold start air control valve underneath. And that hose, if you can see that, it's right next to the throttle body on the factory intake plenum. We'll get a better look soon. That also goes underneath, but you can delete all that stuff. I'll show you that in a minute. All right, so I've been making a bit of progress. So this is the heater lines from the back of the water pump to the heater core. You sort of need to keep them, but this thing here is the cold start air control valve, they call it. It lives underneath here. So there's 2 bolts somewhere here on number 3 runner, and it's got a plug on the end of this thing here. It doesn't matter, you can cut that off or unplug it or do whatever you need to do, but it sort of sits up between the runners here and this hose on the bottom of the intake manifold that comes through the middle. It's a bit of a sneaky one, plugs into that. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that's plugged underneath the intake manifold, and then the other end of it goes into here, which is off your idle control valve. There's like that bolts to your rocker cover, and that goes into your intake. So them 2 hoses, the steel one joins up to this rubber, and this rubber one joins up to the hose underneath, which is just under, like, near between 3 and 4. Oh, 4 and 5, sorry. Underneath there. So you can get rid of all that. Yeah, you just have to make sure you plug that hole up on the back side of that and do something with this to piss that off. So that cleans it all up under here. And then you've only got your heater hose in here. But when you're doing that, this line, this coolant line, goes to, where does that go? I think, oh, that goes up to your throttle body, actually. These hoses, they link up to your throttle body. So, yeah, undo this hose here and crimp that off, and then get rid of all the lines around your throttle body. So that cleans all the stuff up. You could get rid of this solid line and run a flexi line if you wanted to. I cut the coolant lines off the throttle body. It just cleans it up a little bit. And I think there's a vacuum port there. I'll cut that off and plug that up too. So just cleans it all up a little bit. I had someone ask about me 24 volt alternator mount. It's agricultural, but it works. It's not ideal being mounted where the aircon pump is down here, but I've sort of got no other way to put, nowhere else to put it. So I can't put it up here above the 12 volt alternator, because that's where I've seen it done, because the forward facing plenum and things like that, and I don't want it up there anyway. It's just a pain in the ass up there. So it's tucked down here, out of the way, but it's in the way of all the mud and crap. So but it just uses the aircon bracket, and then I've just made up this dodgy little bracket here that bolts onto the front side, and then the alternator picks up that bolt, and then this bolt in the mount. The alternator is just solid mounted, and then it uses the aircon pump pulley, this one, to tension the belt. So pretty easy, pretty straightforward, just a little bit dodgy in the sense that it just doesn't look that good. So pretty much I just got to put the alternator on, 24 volt alternator, put the clutch on, put the intake manifold on, which is easy. I've got to modify the rail for them other injectors, which we'll talk about. And then, yeah, the motor's pretty much ready to go in, but I will do, this is already probably going too long. So next week after this one will be the video dropping this in, and then we'll talk about the turbo setup and things like that. Well, the injector rail's done. They actually come up pretty good. So I've got the intake manifold on as well, and you can see now how much more room you've got under here. Before, the injector rail was tucked up underneath there. So with that all in now, it's probably not something it probably is something I could do to the wagon really, and you could fit the idle control valve a little bit easier. But anyway, that's all done. Intake manifold's on. Actually, I've got to swap the clutch, but that doesn't matter. So it's nearly pretty much ready to go in. So we'll leave this video here. It's already gone on long enough, so in the next video we'll drop the motor in and talk about the turbo stuff, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, if you made it to the end, you are one of the good people, so thank you for that. And if you're a new viewer, make sure you subscribe and do all the normal stuff, like and comment. All that stuff helps heaps. And we'll see you on the next one.